So we're going to go ahead and call to order at 6:36. And begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item C on the agenda is public comment. As you remember from our last meeting, since we now have a hybrid meeting format, we have an opportunity for people here to speak first for public comment, and then we will open it up as well. Do we have anybody on? We do have some people on, so we'll open it up for public comment online as well. We do not have anybody joining with us this evening, so we will pass on public comment in-house. And we'll go ahead and open up for public comment online if anybody's interested. If you are, please raise your hand. Devin will unmute you and you can go ahead and provide your comment at that time.
Hi, Jay. Can you hear us? Jay Tulin?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you guys hear me? It's Jay Tulin. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That's me. 4705156 is me. So just to be official, Jay Tulin, Chair of the Farmington Human Relations Commission and liaison for the Citizens Coalition for Equal Access, which is also in Farmington. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the Citizens Coalition for Equal Access, but basically it's like what it sounds. It's an advocacy group for accessibility, and typically our meetings are held at New Horizons, and there's a number of residents from New Horizons that participate in those meetings. I have a few comments that I'd like to share on behalf of both of those groups, not surprisingly having to do with item number 5. The universal design consultant that we've been speaking on from the very beginning. It's an important matter to the folks at New Horizons and anybody with a disability. One of the things that really became clear throughout the whole process up until the approval of the referendum is that high school is for everybody, and we all know of the shortcomings of accessibility. So I raised the issue at some of our last meetings, and I just wanted to share a few thoughts that came out of those meetings. So I will. I'm just looking at the components of the timeline, which are very obvious. It's just our feeling that, first of all, I'm very happy to see that you're considering it tonight. It's very important that this be part of the entire process and that this moves forward as quickly as possible, and that the consultant should be part of the entire process. And also, one thing that I hadn't thought of that came out of our last discussion, and again, I'm not sure, who's going to be doing, who exactly the group is going to be, but we feel that it's very important that a person with a disability be part of that process as the project goes into construction, that a person with disability be available or be part of the process to be testing out things to make sure that they're all working properly and that they're all compliant. So those are the things that I want to share. Lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to Kat, who always answers my questions and always clarifies stuff for me when I'm confused, which seems to be often lately. So at any rate, I appreciate the time, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Anyone else?
I think we're good.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Item D on the agenda is minutes. So could I get a motion to approve the attached June 30th, 2021 minutes?
Motion. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, unanimously approved. Next order of business is correspondence. So this is correspondence received 6/26/2021 to 7/23/2021. You see 3 pieces of correspondence, all came via website, and are included in your packet. So please take a moment to go ahead and review those questions. Obviously, those are things we'll continue to provide to the building committee and obviously forward on to appropriate people as necessary onto TSKP or CSG to be part of conversations as well. So just so people know, if there's something that needs to be forwarded to considerations, it's not like we're holding communications. As soon as we get it, it's going to go to the right person if there's just additional discussion or conversation around that topic. So just want to make sure anybody who's submitting understands that as well. But please continue to use that online form. If you have questions or thoughts, we're happy to review those. Take comments as well. And if there are questions, we'll do our best to respond back. All right, so we're going to move right on to reports. Is Michael on
It's
that?
not. Yep.
Good. All right. So we'll go right on to reports. First report is chair report. This is going to be very brief from me this evening. So a couple things that I just wanted to mention. So at our last meeting, we did have an agenda item, if you remember, about the August meetings that we were considering. Based on the information that we heard from TSKP in the last meetings and in conversations with CSG, I think it is important that we keep those meetings on the calendar because of what's going on right now and the additional conversations and work that's going to be had. So I think we need to have that time available for our professional partners to bring information forward to us, ask questions, allow us to provide feedback. So if you don't see it back on the agenda today to cancel those meetings, they will remain on the calendar for August. It's the same dates that we had, which I don't know what they are offhand.
11th
11th
and 25th.
11th and 25th. So make sure those are on your calendar. Again, I know this is a tough time of year for everybody. We got a lot of vacations going on. If you have the opportunity to attend, we obviously would like to have as many people as possible. You always have the Zoom option now to be able to kind of hook in and be part of the conversations as well. But if for some reason you can't attend, please let us know ahead of time so that we can. Not anymore, not anymore. I remember calling it. Remember we used to call?
Yeah.
That was always
We've come a
hard.
long way.
Yes, I know, out of necessity, I think. And then the only other update I want to provide is just today, you would have got an email from Kat about a tour going to Guilford High School that Richard is helping us to coordinate. So Kat included with that a doodle poll. So please participate as soon as you can so we can make sure we get back to contacts in Guilford if it's something you're interested in going to see. I don't know, Richard, if you have any other details around what we will be able to do there. Or...
Yeah, the doodle poll suggests 2 time slots per day. There were 4 days.
Okay.
And those 2 time slots are at, for the convenience of Guilford staff because they have limited hours during the summer. So that's the only comment. So we expect either pick one time slot or another. It shouldn't take more than a couple of hours.
So if you have an opportunity to take a look at that and just participate so that we can get back and get that coordinated as soon as we can. I think we're looking to do it over the next couple of weeks is what it sounds like. So if you have any other questions other than that, just let Kat know as well. We can get more information. All right, those were my only 2 updates that I had for chair report. So we can go right on to owner's representative report.
Sure. So just quickly, you also saw a doodle poll from Kat on the OSCGR meeting that we've been working with the state to establish. We have a tentative date of September 1st at 9 a.m. The individual at the state, she's on vacation this week, so we got the auto reply back from her email, but we also know she's pretty much the only one that schedules anything in that office. So we imagine nothing is being scheduled in that office this week. So we're pretty confident that that's going to be the date. And so looking forward to preparing that. We'll have maybe a few some of our conversations to prepare for our meeting, but looking forward to presenting the project to them now. I think the timing of that will be good. Richard and his team will be done with the enhanced schematic design. So we'll have that to bring with us. And possibly, some discussions around where our third-party cost estimator falls in and everything else. So looking forward to that. We'll talk about the grant process. We'll talk about how we're going to manage 2 projects, right? Because we're going in as 2 projects from now on, moving forward, we'll continue to work that way. Our CM, our QRP contract templates all handle it the same way. And so we've been working with the professional partners team to work on that. You'll hear a little bit more on that from the committee. And then what else? We've been working with Richard and TSKP on many fronts. Richard will update you on a lot of those. One of them is to set up our design development work group. We expect that that team, once we get that enhanced schematic design wrapped up, we'll then bring that group together. We'll probably meet once a month for about 5 months or so. We've got to give Richard and his team enough time to react to the feedback, make changes, and then come back to the group. There'll be a lot of other meetings that happen in between that that will need input from the school. Richard will share us more on that in his report. And I think that's it from us on the ownership side.
Questions from Mark? Okay, we'll move right on to architect report.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all again. The last committee meeting we had Tyson Kim and Michael Scott from my office, and they reported on the tentative schedule for the design going forward. But we are on track for that. Just to recap that schedule, it's a total of about 12 months. 2 months for this enhanced schematic design period, and then 5 months roughly for design development, and then another 5 months for construction documents before we can go to the state. We have started work immediately after we've received notification from the committee to proceed with the design. We're just about at the end of halfway point for the enhanced schematic design. All the month of July has been devoted to that. We're going to continue through August. August will be a busy month. We've already released some of our sub-consultants, namely the surveyor and the geotechnical engineer. The surveyor is a company called SLR, previously known as Milone McBroom, which we called NMI in the early feasibility study stage. It's the same company. They've been bought out by a larger firm, but it's the same personnel. And SLR has been to the site. Their survey crews have been here and have been doing work. I imagine they'll be still doing their survey work and mapping for the next couple of weeks. I should report that I got a panicked call from Mark Gorelli saying that the surveyor put a stake in the ground in the turf, in the synthetic turf. And then subsequently I called Kat and she had Russ Arnold on the phone. Russ, if you don't know, is a town engineer as well as public works director. They were in a panic. I immediately called SLR. I spoke with the principal in charge, Steve Ditsko. He was surprised. And all he can say is he thought that the survey crew was doing work in the area in Farmington, and then took it upon themselves to go to the high school to start doing survey work. Steve didn't know that they had done that. He apologized and he said, if there's damage, SLR will take care of any repairs if they're necessary. So I believe that's been conveyed to Kat and to Mark. So survey work is not as disruptive as geotechnical work. So we have a geotechnical engineer called Langen Engineering, who is under our contract to come out to the site and do geotechnical exploration. And the purpose of that is primarily to determine what the subsurface conditions are, what the soils are, basically, so that the foundations can be designed appropriately. There will be a total of 17 borings done, mostly on the footprint of the new building, but some additional footprints just north of the footprint of the building and just east of it as well. In addition to the structural reasons for doing geotechnical exploration, there's also drainage considerations. So the civil engineer on our team again, it's SLR, they're doing civil engineering in addition to survey work, requested that Langen do also percolation tests, basically to determine what the flow of water is through the soil. That will become a critical ingredient in their storm drainage calculations. So they're scheduled, geotechnical people are scheduled to be out here around August 4th through the 6th. They will bring a drilling rig with them. It would be a great photo opportunity in case you wanted to see what goes on and post that on your website. But the representative from Langen Engineering has reached out to Russ Arnold and to Scott Hurwitz, school principal. And I told them, you gotta let people know when you're gonna show up, for heaven's sakes. You gotta let them know where the borings are going to occur. So they prepared a map. That map has been shared with all of our consultants and also with Scott and Russ, just to make sure that they're not boring in locations that is going to cause a problem. Based upon that map, I do know that when there will be one boring done in the parking area, they will patch that pavement when they bore through. And they also have borings throughout that area. That's that open field area where the footprint of the new building will be. They also indicated 2 borings in the baseball field area, one near third base and one just adjacent to the foul line that runs along from home plate to first base. I told them you got to hopefully be outside that area. They can make some adjustments. So when they tour the site, they're going to tour the site. They're trying to coordinate those tours with Russ.
I believe Brittany did it tonight.
Oh, great.
Yep.
So hopefully they signed off on those locations and it's not.
You can see the flags in the field. If
Okay.
you were to walk over there, you can see the pink flags there. I imagine those are the.
Hopefully
flags
those
of
pink
ones.
flags will stay
Yes.
and not get moved around. We've had stakes moved around in the past. Just, mischievous people. But hopefully, wherever they do the borings, hopefully it'll be where those flags are located. Then the survey crew will come back and pinpoint those locations because those need to be mapped on the survey going forward. Everyone's going to be relying on those locations. Once that survey is done, those stakes don't have to stay. So we are, as you heard a minute ago, trying to get a tour of Guilford High School scheduled. Hopefully you can respond to that doodle survey and we can get that confirmed. I spoke with the assistant principal, Joe Raven, for the record people, it's R-E-B-H-U-N. He's been involved in the project from the beginning when the project was built. And so he's very familiar with it. There's a new school principal in Guilford right now at the high school, but we'll be having a tour with Joel. So hopefully he'll be able to attend. On August 10th, we have a meeting scheduled at Scott Hurwitz's office. The purpose of that meeting is to discuss with school staff and administration the reviews of the design going forward. On the 10th, we will present the enhanced schematic plan, floor plan, not details, because we want to make sure that we identify the locations on that plan where we would like to have the appropriate users of those spaces assigned. The way I envision this going forward is that, let's say, users might be the PE personnel or athletic director to review all of the plan areas that are associated with their everyday activities. So I hope that on the 10th, we can get some indication of who those reviewers will be. Another area is the performing arts area, music and performing arts. And then another area is the science labs, the school administrative office area, and then let's not forget the 900 wing, the central office area. We don't need the full committee there at these reviews. We just need representatives, the people that you designate, to actually sit down with us and do those reviews. And that will probably happen starting in September. But at this meeting on the 10th, I would like to have some direction from school administration on who those people should be. And then we have these two committee meetings that are scheduled on the 11th and the 25th. So on the 11th, we'll be able to report back to this committee the kinds of comments we've received so far and who the designated people, I hope, will be to review those user areas. And then on August 25th, we'll present the enhanced schematic design and we'll share with you the work that we've been doing and get your feedback. Based on your feedback, we may edit those enhanced schematic material and then go immediately to our cost estimator, which will be the same cost estimator that we engaged previously, PMNC. And they have already dedicated to a 2-week period to update their schematic estimate based upon the new and refined information. So that'll take care of August. It will be a busy week. We've already engaged all of our major sub-consultants. We do want to talk a little bit about some additional consultants should you deem it necessary to add them. So is this the time to talk about that?
No, we're going to do that new business.
Oh, okay,
We'll
that
do
will be
later
under
on.
business.
Yeah.
So I think that takes you up to date on what our activities are. up until now.
Any questions for Richard? Anybody online? No, you're good. Excellent. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. Next report is professional partnerships subcommittee report.
Yeah, no problem. So the Professional Partnerships Subcommittee met last week on the 21st. And the purpose of that meeting was to review and approve the draft RFQ for a construction manager. The version that they approved is in tonight's packet for full committee approval. They also reviewed the RFQ score sheet that is also in the packet for full committee approval. And I believe that was it in terms of the approvals, but the Professional Partnership Committee is going to be meeting more frequently. We are going to probably schedule a meeting in the next week or so to review the contract for the construction manager. We're going to include that in the RFQ we're issuing as an addendum. So we're finalizing that to review, approve, and then put in. And then also we will need to discuss the interview format for the construction manager interviews. We will also have the RFP. So we'll go over the RFQ and that whole entire process in a little bit more detail when that agenda comes up. But the Professional Partnership Subcommittee is going to be a little bit more engaged over the next month or so until we get all of our partners that we need in position and a part of the team.
So it's really this construction manager and the other consultant name that I can never remember.
The commissioning agent.
Commissioning agent.
Yep.
I'll get it eventually. But those really will be the focus of the professional partnership committee, to get those lined up. Same process that we've always gone through. This is nothing new. It's just a new set of criteria that we're looking at, evaluating, and obviously building the RFQ up to the office. So. Make sense, everyone? Questions or thoughts on that? All right, so final report is financial report.
And for the financial report, we have no update. We have not spent any money since the last meeting. So the previous financial report is included in the minutes here, where we had a remaining balance on hand of $126,125.91.
And you may notice in the report listing that the communications subcommittee was not included because we did cancel the meeting for this month, just to kind of get our feet underneath us. You know, one of the things we're going to talk about is the communications proposal that's on the agenda for new business, but just kind of figuring out where we are, what's the best way to start the communication. So we'll pick that right back up next month and start really thinking about that process of communication. So just in case anybody's wondering why that report wasn't, we've seen it for so long in that list. So just took a little bit of a break this month for communications. All right, anything or any other questions you may can think of based on report outs or anything you want to ask based on that information? Okay. All right, we'll go right into new business. I'm first going to ask for a motion to review and approve the attached sustained communications proposal from Tall Timbers Marketing.
Second.
All right, I'm going to open this up for discussion. So this was something that we discussed in a little bit more detail last week. Johnny, we had a great question of wanting to be able to review what was included, timeline. So that was sent out in detail, the full proposal this came from Tall Timbers for the next, I think it's a 4-year period that we'd be looking at for this, this proposal and what would be included in those services as well as cost. So hopefully everybody had an opportunity to review that. And we just want to see if anybody had any questions or thoughts around that or made sense. Was the detail helpful, John? I think it's
Yeah,
good to
no,
see it as
I went through it when Cass sent it out, and it seemed very reasonable.
Yeah, we think so, and especially having Ira with the knowledge of the project that he's bringing forward, I think is very helpful for us. And you know, we just want to make sure we know how important communication was pre-referendum. We want to stress that that is just as important as we move through the process over the next several years. So, and keep the community engaged to make sure people really understand the process. So, any other questions or thoughts on that, on the proposal? Makes sense to everybody? I think it was pretty comprehensive of what we would need. Obviously, the communication subcommittee is a big part of that, content creation and a review of newsletters and all of those things, but to have a little guidance, I think is helpful as well.
And to continue our efforts, because
Yeah.
again, this is the biggest investment in this town's history. You know, the residents are making this investment, and I think it's important to continue that communication in the form we know that they read, according to our surveys, which is the newsletter, continuously.
As well as we're going to continue to focus on the website, keep those updates. We have some content, I think, already that we might be able to kind of condense and get up on the website to help with some of the timeline things. I think those are kind of some of the big questions people are going to have right now is what does this look like? You know, what's the timeline? And obviously we're doing estimates, of course, at this time, but just to kind of keep people informed and have a quick reference for them, I think it's important too. All right, any other discussion? Okay, so all in favor of approving the attached sustained communications proposal from Tall Timbers Marketing?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimously approved. Thank you. All right, so we're going to go right on to a little bit more detailed conversation here. So number 2, can I get a motion to review and approve the attached draft RFQ for construction management services?
Second.
All right, we'll open this up for discussion. So I'm going to ask Kat to kind of give us some detail around the process, some key points around the RFQ, and then kind of open that up and see if you have questions or thoughts around what we have here.
Yep, like I gave in the professional partnership subcommittee update. This was reviewed and approved by the professional partnership subcommittee. There were some suggestions and some tweaks that were made in response to that meeting. Since then, this has also been reviewed by our attorneys and the state as well. We figured it was important because they are giving us reimbursement for a construction manager that there's another set of eyes on it. So really not many updates from the professional partnership subcommittee, just a few legal things here and there. I think the most important thing to go over is on page 14 of the draft agreement, which is just the overall schedule, which will kind of give us a good idea about how this whole process is going to work. So pending tonight's approval, we will advertise the RFQ by the end of the week. That means we'll post it in the Harvard Current, we'll put it on, it'll be posted on the school website, we will likely post it on the town website as well, and it'll be on the DAS website through the state of Connecticut. There is a pre-qualification conference that's going to be held on August 12th. That time is confirmed at 12:30 here at the high school for them to walk around. Sam Kilpatrick and Scott Hurwitz are going to help us make sure everybody has access to that, answers any questions, and walks them through at that time. The firms that are going to put in have an opportunity to ask questions by August 16th. Those will be sent to Sam, and working with CSG, we will compile responses and issue an addendum so that all prospective firms get updates to all the questions that are asked. That final addenda will be issued by 8/18, which would give firms a good amount of time to finalize their proposals and submit them by August 23rd. Like we normally do, the building committee will review all of the proposals. We have the score sheet and evaluation criteria included in this agenda. That will happen, that'll happen before the September 8th meeting. So what we do is we'll compile all of the proposals. Devin and I drive around town and drop them off to your house. Then you have time to go through them, score them. You submit the scores back to me, and we will compile a sheet that at that September 8th meeting, we review in executive session. We come out of executive session and we name our short list of firms. Those shortlisted firms will now receive an RFP, which will be a fee proposal for both projects, the 900 central office renovation and the new building. They will submit those to us by September 17th. And then we will have interviews for those firms in public at our meeting on September 22nd. Like we typically do after the interviews, we go into executive session again, we discuss, and we come out and we name a firm, dependent on reference checks, all of those things, and due diligence by the town. So that's kind of the overarching schedule for the process of getting a construction manager on board. Are there any questions about that? Nope.
Just, maybe this is directed towards Mark or Richard, but what type of interest do you see? I mean, what the anticipated number of firms that might?
So it's a great,
respond?
great question. There's a lot of interest already, even since the time that it was, passed referendum. I think we received calls. I'm sure you have too. I would say that there's, you'll probably get, I think Richard, you can confirm with me, 6 to 8 to 10, maybe, 10's a lot, but so probably 6 to 8 firms that can have the capacity to handle the schedule, the workload, the dollar amount per month that's going to be put into these shops. I don't know if you agree with that.
I would agree, and you'll probably get calls, packages from Massachusetts to New York.
Thanks.
I will just add quickly that there is one thing highlighted on page 16 that's just adding pollution liability insurance as one of the requirements. That was a suggestion from our attorney. I'm just waiting to confirm the limits that we will request for that firm. So that will be added prior to posting this.
So just a side note on that, so just keep in mind the 9/22 meeting, if we all ready for that will be in long. Right? So if we're interviewing and doing discussions in executive session, it's probably going to be approved. So just from a scheduling perspective, just keep that in mind. I'm not sure about the shortlist discussion. I'm going to think maybe not as long for 9/8. But
No, a lot of times we have them scored ahead of time, so we come with a comprehensive sheet of how everything shook out. And then it's a review and discussion in executive session. So it is a little bit shorter than when we do the interview process, because that's the final decision.
Trying to remember the last time around, because we had gotten a CM
before.
beforehand to help during the process. And I know with the architects, we split them up. We went to like maybe 8 or 10 qualified, we went down to 4. We split it up into 2 nights. So, I don't remember if we had the same time frame for the construction managers. I don't think there's as much vision involved as there is qualifications and how they process who their partners are. So it'll be a long night, but we can get it done.
I think so too, based on what we're hearing and like you said, going through some of the details and understanding of the kind of conversations and questions. And that is another piece that Kat mentioned that we are going to spend time on, obviously, is those are the big questions. So we'll come into the conversation with some preliminary thoughts, but then give the committees thoughts on it, because I think maybe we have some unique things we want to discuss and ask as well, so.
And one
Keep that in mind.
One thing that brings up a good point about how we narrowed it down to 4 last time, added language from our attorney is that we will request no more than 4 qualified firms. There is a state statute that is referred to in here regarding shortlisting that our attorney reviewed and put in here. So it looks like we'll narrow it down to 4 for interviews.
Any other questions or thoughts based on the review? Remember, this is just on the RFQ. We're going to open it back up for discussion on the criteria. So. And we're good on mine. Right, so all in favor to approve the attached draft RFQ for construction management services?
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent, all right, we are unanimously approved. So you should be all set as far as the schedule is concerned now, right?
Yep,
That's great. All right, so could I get a motion to review and approve the attached draft score sheet for the construction manager RFQ?
Second.
Open it up for discussion. So, Patty, you want to give some the thought behind how this was even constructed to make logical sense based on the RFQ?
Yep, absolutely. Again, this was reviewed and approved by the Professional Partnership Subcommittee. But if you go to the page 14, yes, 14 of the actual RFQ itself, there's criteria for evaluating qualified submissions. The RFQ rating form was built off of those criteria. So the RFQ is put out, we tell the firms, this is what we're looking for in a firm, and then the corresponding rating form kind of judges how they respond to that.
Give everybody a second, I just want to take a quick look through. Any other questions or thoughts? Everybody's good? Online, we're good too. All right, excellent. All right. So all in favor to approve the attached draft score sheet for the construction manager RFQ?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimously approved. All right, so we're now, Richard, where we're going to go into to have some conversation about the consultants that Richard mentioned before. So item number 4, can I get a motion to approve the inclusion of environmental design and food service design consultants in TSKP Studios' scope of services? Motion. Second. All right, and then I will open that up for discussion. So Richard, you want to give us some background?
Sure. So let's talk about environmental design consultant first. This is basically hazardous materials. It's listed as environmental design consultant, but this is an environmental specialist. They usually have personnel on board who are licensed environmental professionals, LEPs, who are licensed to identify and then subsequently quantify the hazmat materials that construction people, demolition people may encounter in this project. And it's important to confirm the budget for this item. This is not in our scope of work. It is very often in the owner's scope of work. So you have soft costs associated with a number of consultants already. And I imagine that one of them was an environmental consultant. Now, in conversations that we had with CSG, they said, well, rather than having the owner contract directly with an environmental consultant, it could be assigned to TSKP as a convenience, and certainly we're willing to do that. But you understand, we're not environmental experts. We're not licensed to do this. We would rely on the expertise of an environmental consultant to actually do that work. We will also rely on this consultant to provide abatement plans and specs. Those abatement plans and specs are something that the state looks for. When we have demolition of an old building, they want to make sure that it's in the package. If you were to hire an environmental consultant, we would work with that consultant to make sure that those plans and specs can be folded into our set. We want to bid everything together so that the abatement and demolition contractors know the scope of work. It's not just demolishing the building, it's also appropriately removing any hazmat material and then properly disposing of it. So I'm prepared to get proposals from a number of consultants. This is not a recommendation. I'm just telling you who we worked with in the past. Okay, we will get proposals from these people unless you object, or if you want to add to this list, we can work with CSG to expand the list. But we've worked in the past with Langen Engineering, with Ty and Bond. Ty is spelled T-I-G-H-E, and Bond, and Eagle Environmental. We work with those folks, or we wouldn't have any problem working with them again. Ultimately, this is qualifications driven as well as fee. So if we were to get those proposals, we'll review them with you, we'll make some recommendation, I imagine, in collaboration with CSG, and then we'll proceed to the next step. I hope I can get these proposals to you, plus whatever others you may want to recommend, by your next meeting on the 11th of August. So hopefully that can be on the agenda. Similarly, food service design is a specialist in kitchen equipment, basically. And we don't, that's not in our scope. Again, we can fold that into our scope of work. And we've worked successfully in the past with food service design. That's the name of the company. That's what they do. And we've also worked successfully with Crabtree and McGrath. Either of those can do a fine job. So again, we'll get proposals from them. If you want to add to that list, Mark.
Sure. No, I think that's good.
Okay. That's basically it.
I think we wanted feedback from the group, or even, if your team has worked with some of these consultants in the past and things didn't work favorably, we want to know that before we present, a price from them. So if there's any group that you've heard Richard say tonight, then we'd like to.
So Mick, I would maybe suggest tabling this until we have the proposals.
Yep.
So that we can put this on the next agenda and have time to review these proposals from these firms.
That makes sense to everybody, just understanding. What we wanted to do is make sure everybody understood what the purpose of these consultants were, as well as we need to make that decision in order to move that to the scope of TSB in order to handle the proposal process. Yeah.
No, just process, but at the end of the day, we have to hire these people because they weren't included. And our just basically keeping the approval of the SKP to handle it. We haven't approved any actual proposals at this point.
Correct.
That's really what
Yeah.
the motion is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do it that way,
That's a
say
good
we're
point.
just folding it under.
Under
their-
TSKP.
Yeah, that would get rid of that, so we can take care of the proposals when they come.
Especially this one, you're right, Donnie, because these two are grouped together because they're needed.
Correct.
These two consultants.
Right.
Yeah, that might be a better way to do it.
And the environmental is included in the contingency under the professional.
So yes, this is already baked in. I understand the necessity and that Richards is outside their scope, but this is already baked into our.
One of them.
One of
One of them was
Kind of
outside.
So, yeah, I just want to be really clear on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
So the environmental design
Yeah.
piece is absolutely baked in. The food service design consultant is not.
Okay.
So that is something we're gonna make, that's obviously the cost is important, their understanding of services. We know they're needed, but it's certainly something we gotta take into consideration, and we'll need to make sure we know that once we have all the information.
Right, and the idea is you go to contingency.
Okay.
That makes sense to everybody? So it sounds like, based on the statement that we have, and the actual motion that's on the table, is really just to make sure that we are comfortable with TSKP taking over the contracts and the proposal management of
Correct.
these consultants. That makes sense. Everybody online, good? Yes, okay. All right, so we'll stop it, we'll actually go forward with this motion then, to approve the inclusion of environmental design and food service design consultants in TSKP Studios' scope of services. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, so obviously we're gonna hear more about this as we get more detail, costs associated, things like that, but we've now handed it over to you.
Great.
All right, so next one is number 5, which, so okay, a motion to take any action on theater design and or universal design consultants for the FHS building project.
Second.
All right, we'll open that up for discussion as well.
Sure. So sometimes we've worked with theater design specialists, depending on the size of the project and its complexity. And we've worked in the past with a company called Next Stage Design. They have very qualified personnel on board. They've done work throughout New York City as well as other parts of the country, even internationally. You don't need Broadway productions, or maybe you do want Broadway productions. But we're very familiar with high school programs, but this could be an additional sounding board for the committee as well as faculty and staff. Someone to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I think it's a wise thing to do, especially because it's a complicated space. And it's also a space in which you have performances, you have students practicing theater activities, not only as performers, but as production people as well. So it's a learning lab. So I think it's worthwhile. We can certainly get a proposal. And if your theater folks in town or a faculty have a previous working relationship with professional theater people, we can add that to the list and we can even get proposals from them as well. I don't know if they have. So again, it's an item that we could add if you're so inclined. And the last one is universal design. Other than the Farmington ordinance to consider or to include universal design principles in its planning, it's not something that we've encountered in other municipalities. At least I have not in Connecticut. In Massachusetts, however, where I have done work with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, they do require a universal design consultant. And this is, we talked about it at a building committee meeting, I think it was over a year ago. And I tried to explain at that time, this goes above and beyond ADA, which we would do anyway. We do ADA compliant design and the state looks for that. But universal design goes a little bit further and it takes into account equipment that is being brought into the facility. Unlike building components, it also goes a lot further to actual implementation of equipment. You may have digital displays that have controls. You may have audiovisual equipment that may prohibit, the design of which may prohibit the use by some. So not something that we normally carry, at least not in Connecticut work that we've done thus far. However, in Massachusetts, we have brought in a company called Kessler McGinnis. Kessler McGinnis is the code consultant, ADA consultant. They also do universal design reviews. So we can certainly get a proposal from Kessler McGinnis, or we can get a proposal from another firm that you might recommend.
It's important to note we did include some dollars in the professional fees for universal design, so there are dollars there in those pro fees that we identified in our notes.
And I think also part of the discussion would be to include these, if if decided to move forward with both, these are above and beyond. Again, we have included universal design, but to put also under TSKP's scope of services.
Yeah, but again, that's your call. But one way to do it is if you were to retain this consultant, we would certainly present to this consultant all of the material that we're preparing for the design. We would then expect some sort of written report back so that we could incorporate whatever recommendations they might have. And I did hear Jay Tulin say he would probably recommend that a disabled person actually test the spaces either during construction or immediately after construction to demonstrate that it does meet universal design standards. So that could be someone that you retain directly. It's your call, or bring them on board.
I think for convenience sake, again, I think I would recommend that we hold that into TSKP Studios. Responsibilities, but that's just, again, it's up to the committee to decide.
Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think any consultant that we get out and above, I think we want to roll in. I still have questions on maybe not the theater design so much, because I get there's such an emphasis in Farmington on theater production, and that, we've dealt with the same auditorium before I was born. And that being said, it could be more than just for this school. It could be a destination center too for other communities at one point. Maybe, and I do agree that, this, to do it right for 50 years, not that I don't trust the design qualifications TSKP, but on the universal one, this one I struggle a little bit more only because, even from mine, although much smaller, it's like ADA and even some of the enhanced stuff is kind of baked into the design that we do. So I think I was more convincing on, whether we need another consultant to back up what we're doing. So that one I struggle with a little bit more.
That's something we get from proposals, like understanding of what's actually included.
We can do that after, move forward, but then see what comes and say,
Right.
can we go
Does
forward?
that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, I know of one firm that we've worked with that, as I mentioned, Kessler McGinnis, that they're qualified to do this. I don't know of another firm. I mean, I could try to find another firm, but I don't know of one. As I sit here tonight.
But they could pose the scope of services, what the ad services would look like. Something a little more detailed that the committee could look at to say, oh, okay, I see, I get it.
I can try to come up with something like that, yes.
I think that's what.
That's what we're looking
I'm
for.
more
Better
comfortable before, moving forward on saying yes, I see what they would be adding and what kind of cost would be involved, and what exactly they'd be doing.
That makes
We're
sense.
just voting, committee would just vote to move forward.
Correct, that these are things.
Further consider it, not to lock it in.
That's for tonight, yeah, because we do, I think this is, okay, hold on, Michael, one second. They, I do think, yeah, we just need a little bit more education, understanding value, cost.
What's the added
normal,
value?
right, exactly, and I think, so understanding some.
Oh, Mark's.
So that's kind of the difference between the other, a better, I think we kind of, obviously environmental design and food service. And we understand that's required, but I think it's just a little bit more education around. And to be honest with you, even theater design, I'd be interested to learn more about exactly what's included in that, so.
I have a question on the theater design for Richard. Will that include the acoustics and sound and lighting? Because you did talk about space and I understand that, but just if that's another cost or that's included in the package?
We have, as a separate consultant, already included in our fee acoustic design and review. And acoustics, it's not just theater, it's also noise within spaces, it's transmission of noise from one room to another, it's noise that may be generated by mechanical equipment. All of that is going to be handled by another consultant that we already included.
But when you're talking about theater design, you're talking about auditorium, I know that's
so I would.
in a way different category.
Yeah, it is a different category. What I would expect a theater consultant to advise us on is how many lighting positions do you want? You want one catwalk or two? That's a function of whether you have a thrust stage or not. Do you need a an orchestra pit or not. Some auditoriums have them, some don't.
So they would be more about the space, right, and the usage of the space versus more of the technical and I guess mechanics.
Well, some technical things are part of theater design. For instance, should they use any of the lighting equipment they have? You have a big investment in theatrical lights. I saw some of it. Some of it looks kind of old, but is any of it reusable? Can it be incorporated into a computer-controlled lighting system? We would look to that theater consultant to specify the lighting controls, for example. And that could determine what light fixtures, what theatrical lights you have right now could be reused in a new computerized lighting system. The design of the soundproof or control room, all that's incorporated into theater design.
Any other questions or thoughts right this moment? Oh, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
I just echo the concerns raised about the additional universal design. Has anybody brought to our attention particular areas of concern that would go beyond the scope of code requirements that would be ADA? Can you sort of narrow down what's this gap that wouldn't be covered under code, but would go further through universal design? Are there any specifics that sort of come to mind?
That question
Yeah,
addressed to me. So my belief is that universal design extends to equipment, telephone system, for example. The telephone system really doesn't fall under building code. Does it fall under ADA? I'm not so sure. It's an item that you purchased and install. But what about the actual push buttons? I think that falls under universal design.
That's helpful, thank you. So if there's a proposal that the scope would be identified, and it's valuable to understand that nuance of what wouldn't be covered in code, but is important in terms of usability of the school property.
Right.
Thanks.
I think beyond mobility, I'm not sure, Richard, if that makes sense or not. Other impairments beyond what ADA might consider.
Well, I mean, we really cover things of more hardware, light switches, outlets, those kinds of things that are built into infrastructure of the building. We don't really get into transportation. So I don't know if that's something you want to add to the scope of universal design review.
Less about transport. I'm thinking about other disabilities beyond what accessibility means.
What do you got in mind?
So hearing, visual impairment, those kinds of things.
Visual impairment is something that we would consider as part of the building. So to make sure that people who are visually impaired, you have braille or raised lettering, for example, in communication. So I don't know what else. ADA kind of has a big list of physical difficulties, physical limitations.
Thank you.
But isn't that, I mean, I think the whole point is that we need a scope of service to see
Right.
what we're getting. Yeah.
Or even a little primer on what is universal design, very boiled down, but in case we don't get a basic explanation, because I've heard some explanations as liaison to the Human Relations Commission and Ruth Roby talking about how it's really about ease of use for any difficulty. I mean, in parks, it's for strollers so it's beyond ADA, and ADA is what, 30 years old about now, so that they're just things that are moving forward and expectations for public buildings that ADA didn't even think of or touch.
Right.
So we don't want to build a building that misses the boat on some of those things that could have been maybe even easily incorporated, but we have to really know what to look for and what to build for.
Right, and I think we learned a lot from that, from Ruth Grovey, that
Yeah.
there's many things that are universal, is you design it for universal design, that's not necessarily, it's much more above an ADA. It's not, they're two
But not
separate.
necessarily more expensive. I mean, it
Right,
could be, but
exactly,
it's just the
exactly.
design aspect.
So I think you just need a scope to see what all these things would be, and for value, the extra
Yeah, so we're
value.
just not missing something.
Right.
We're building for, truly for the
I think
21st.
during the feasibility stage, this was brought up, and I think one example I came up with, hearing impaired people who use sign language. People don't realize that when two hearing impaired people walking down the hallway are signing each other, they're not paying attention necessarily to columns that might be obstructions. So and I learned this through a project at the American School of the Deaf. They said, do not have freestanding columns. That's not defined in ADA. And I learned that through that project, that this is a hazard for hearing impaired. And also the recommendation through that experience was intersections of corridors people who are hearing impaired don't necessarily hear footsteps. So if you have a whole community of hearing impaired people, like at American School of the Deaf, at the intersections of corridors, they really wanted to have those corners chamfered so that there was enough visual cue before you just bumped into somebody when you got to an intersection of the corridor. For them, that was very important. So that might be something that universal design people advocates might want to advise on. Is it in ADA? No.
Question, would IT fall under universal design?
That's a good question. Like monitors?
I mean, the way school systems are now, with teaching, everything's, you even talked about visual technology, smart boards, access to internet. I'm just curious the way we've been evolving the last few years with our teaching practices. Where does IT fall and will it be under universal design?
Quite possibly. I do think we need more scope of services defined. And so if we could I'll reach out to Yes, let me get this. Thank you. I can reach out to them and see what they might consider universal design added consultation. There's another firm out there, well, their input as well.
That makes sense. I think obviously that's the piece of information we're missing on whether we actually go. I guess what I'm missing is, so we're gonna do that review before we determine if we want a proposal.
I think it's the same.
It's the same, right? It's the same thing. I'm
Here,
thinking.
review scope of services with the fee.
Right? It's really a proposal that we're asking for, to say this is what you're gonna do, because our next question is gonna be, okay, yeah, I understand all this, how much does it cost, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's really, we're asking for, we'd like, yes, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but that we're asking to go forward on getting proposals from consultants in these two areas.
Right.
Is that
And we just
right?
hope, particularly with universal design, that it's educational.
Correct,
We get a-
yeah.
And maybe it's something where we do our own research or someone else could. Depends on what those proposals look like as far as.
Yeah.
Information to help us make the decision.
Okay.
Does that make sense to
Yeah.
everybody? So that's really what we would be, so I'd probably have to change this motion a little bit.
Absolutely.
I'm never gonna.
All right.
I'm not gonna on the fly motion change it. We need, I Inez,
I got it.
things planner to read that.
One of them are-
What's that?
There's usually one.
Yeah, there's always somebody that's there.
How's this?
Has to request TSKP Studio to solicit proposals for theater design and universal design consultants.
That would include the scope of work, right?
scope of
Yeah.
work and,
Yes.
and the fee, right, at the same time,
That's a big-
right, because it's
Yeah.
not just the fee.
So we've got to remove the motion that we have on the floor then.
Yeah, yeah, all right, so,
Well, that's just to take any actions. Does that cover you or?
Yeah, this is the action.
just, can I amend this one? Can I
Yeah,
amend
that's
this
fine.
one?
Yeah.
I don't think that-
All right, so. So now the motion is on the table with the amendment. So the motion on the table is to take action on theater design and our universal design consultants for the FHS building project. And the amendment would include,
To request TSKP Studio to solicit proposals for theater design and universal design consultants.
Vote on the amendment.
Yeah, you have to vote on the amendment first, and then you vote for.
all right, so that is, we're getting it all in tonight. It's been everything.
Work out. I know how they're Robert's rules.
All right, so that is the motion that's on the table right now. So all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? All right, so amendment is unanimously approved. And so the full motion, can I get a motion to, I'm gonna do it all over again, or just this one?
Just this one.
To request TSKP Studio to solicit proposals for theater design and universal design consultants.
So move.
Oh, did you do a second? Okay. All right, any discussion, any further discussion on this? Makes sense to everybody? All right, all in favor? Opposed? All right, universal. Unanimously approved. All right, that was our last agenda item prior to adjournment. I think we covered everything we needed. So again, please remember, everybody, those August meetings are on our calendars. We have already started building the agendas around those. So please make sure we have that there. If you can't make it, let us know. But obviously, the Zoom information will be available as well. All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, adjourned at 7:43.